Hello everybody, this is Michael from Valor Recon here today with another Valorant video. In today's video, we're kind of taking a break from some of the more serious stuff and just having some fun with a Valorant agent tier list. So Chamber just came out, and so I thought, oh, well, what a great time to just kind of talk about the characters of the game, maybe which ones need reworks, which ones are doing really well, and maybe even need a nerf. And we're going to talk about all of that here today, including our boy Chamber. Again, this is just a kind of fun video I'm trying out. This is a new channel. So I'm just going to say this now. If you enjoy this, please leave a like and subscribe. It would mean a lot. But yeah, without further ado, let's jump into this. First thing we need to talk about, how am I ranking these? There are a couple different ways you can do a tier list. How I'll be doing it is based on my perceived power level. And it's going to be a little convoluted in the way that I'm going to be mixing pro play and comp. And that's kind of because, you know, you can have a tier list for competitive play, and characters like Reyna are going to be way higher up that list. And then you can have a tier list for pro games. I'm not a pro. I've watched, pro games, but I do play comp. And so I'm kind of mixing those two together to kind of get a general power level, because that's kind of how Valorant has to look at it. I mean, Riot looks at this and they have to both balance for competitive and for the pro scene. And so I think if I can find a list that kind of represents both, that'd be pretty awesome. So why don't we jump into this? This is not scripted ahead of time, so I don't know where I'll be placing stuff. Stuff may end up moving. Let's jump into this. Starting off, we are going to go with someone who I think I can guaranteed put at the top of the list, Viper. Viper used to be a character that was almost always at the bottom of everyone's list, but ever since the buff of as soon as you walk into her poison, you get 30 less health, she is a driving force in the meta, especially on recent maps like Icebox and Breeze. Those two are really awesome to have Viper, and even Fracture. And so I think Viper is just super versatile. You can use her on a lot of different maps, and she's a punishing controller. I mean, Omen and Brimstone have nice smokes that are a lot more have a lot more ability to be placed in different spots, but if an enemy pushes them, there's way less of a disadvantage. With, pushing a smoke, that's already not a great idea. In pro play, it does happen. In comp, it does happen. But pushing an Omen smoke, you're way less likely to be killed than pushing a Viper smoke, because with a Viper smoke, you're coming out at a disadvantage. And then the wall also allows for, if you have a coordinated team, some very awesome pushes. So I think Viper is a very, very good character, but you probably already knew that. Again, we'll get another obvious one out of the way with Jett. And this one I actually considered putting her at A. And the reason for that is I feel like part of her is overhyped, but then you look at the fact that she has that dash, and it just, she is very similar to Chamber in the way that, you can get out of situations, you have good eco, you can kind of get up to high spots, and we'll talk a little bit more about that when I talk about Chamber, but Jett has everything in a kit for taking space. I mean, you can play weird off angles, both by just playing there and being able to dash out, and also having those updrafts. You have smokes for getting away, you have all these different tools, and I feel like it just comes together to create this very, very powerful agent for like the pushing power of a team. And I think it's probably the only duelist up at S tier. Looking at some other ones, I think if we're looking at characters that are good but maybe not S tier, we have something along the lines of Skye. Now, if this was before the nerf, I would say Skye was S tier, but they did slow down her flashes a little bit. She's still very good, has that heal, has insane flashes that are both information, they regenerate, they do a lot of really awesome stuff, they're very controllable, and so I feel like it's just a really nice combination. Also has that the wolf, which is really, really awesome, and I would say she's probably the best initiator on a couple maps. Specifically Split, I think she's definitely the best initiator, but we'll talk a little bit about the best initiator in my opinion, that being Sova. Sova is a powerhouse, and I mean, seeing Viper, Jett, and Sova at the top of my list is probably not surprising to many people. Not a very radical pick by any stretch of the imagination. He can help push onto sites with just a single ability. The drone is even more insane than the wolf. Shock darts can get not cheap kills, but can get kills, and then also can be used for post plant. So like, he's good at taking sites, he's good at post plant, he's good at stalling, and so he's kind of good at everything you need in that initiator role. The only map he's really not played on is Split. In comp that he play on Split, it's just not as big, and he's still fine on the map. So I think when you look at Sova, even at his weakest, even, not knowing a bunch of fancy lineups and all of that, he's still a very, very powerful character. Whereas someone like Viper, got to know the lineups, kind of have to be on the right maps, all of that. So yeah. Next, let's talk about my boy Omen. Once upon a time, I was an Omen main. I've kind of just flexed into a controller main, at least when playing comp. And that's just because Omen, at this point, does not feel very relevant in the meta. And so at this point, I'm going to put him as a D character. He may get bumped up. It's a very high D. And let me explain this. So, his smokes, he's a controller, and so his smoke should be his main attraction. But his smokes are slower than Astra's and Brimstones. He gets less of them than Astra. Astra can put them anywhere. So essentially, if you're playing smokes, Astra's just going to be better at smoking. And so in my opinion, what they need to do is buff Omen by increasing the speed of his smokes. At one point, they kind of debuffed him or nerfed him and reduced the speed of his smokes. I think that a really awesome way to define the different controllers, here we go. Ready? Omen does fast smokes. Brimstone does long and heavy smokes. You can almost say the ones that you can't see inside of and can all be placed down at the same time. And then we have Astra, who does global smokes, and Viper, who does punishing smokes. And you kind of have these different types of smokes for different kinds of things. But Omen is slower than Astra, has less than Astra, can't put them all at the same time, like Brimstone. And so there's not a ton of interesting things about his smokes other than they can be put inside walls, which is kind of a niche scenario. Yes, you can do one-ways with that. Looking at his other abilities, Paranoia is his best ability, and that's a pretty good one, although I will say the hitbox is a little strange on it. The ult is a little lackluster, maybe reducing it to 6 points or adding some sort of blindness effect. We actually just got the confirmation today that Omen, the leaked Omen buffs were never actually real. They were just someone made them up and they got taken as true. So that's kind of interesting to see. But I'm really hoping they push him up and kind of make his abilities worth something. I mean, it just feels like all of his abilities are outclassed outside of maybe Paranoia. And just if he's your controller, you don't want to have the worst smokes in the game, which is kind of sad because there was a time where I would have argued Omen was the best controller in the game. Either way, let's move on to Cypher, who I think is a solid B tier pick. Depending on the map, he's going to be better or worse. And at the same time, I'm also going to put down Killjoy. I think Killjoy is above Cypher just because of that versatility. People don't have to walk into tripwires. They can set off an alarm bot or a turret. So I think both of them are very, very good Sentinels. I just think that Cypher's a little bit more situational and therefore is technically not as good of a character. Plus, Killjoy has the mollies for both post-plant and for denying plants, whereas Cypher is just a lot more information-based. And so because of those things, I think, Killjoy's still a really good pick. Putting her up in A, could honestly go in S depending on whose list you're looking at, and then Cypher at B. The buff, basically, where Jett can no longer dash through his wires is probably one of the biggest factors that he's not near C or D, because it can really, there are times I've been Jett and I just dash and I get slingshot around, especially if I'm dashing off a ledge, like B Heaven, or not B Heaven, Hookah on Bind. And so I think because of that, his viability did greatly shoot up. Next, let's talk about Astra. Now, I'm kind of torn. I think Astra has to go in S tier. It's between S and high A, and obviously there's a little bit of bias from me being a controller main, but I feel like it's, every team should have a controller, and if you're not running Viper, you should run Astra. That's how it feels right now in the meta, and so it almost feels like on, the maps where, on things where you're going to want more traditional smokes, like on Ascent or even Haven, stuff like that, Astra is just the best. She has global smoke. She has all of these abilities that can do a coordinated push. Now, if you are in, iron, bronze, silver, gold, plat, anywhere where you're not having communication, Astra drops drastically on this list. And so I actually think I'm going to put her at top of A just because I am considering comp. And in a situation where you don't have communication, Astra suffers even more than Viper does. Viper needs communication, but not nearly as much as Astra does. And so that, it's a high A for Astra, but I do not think, I think the fact that you need that communication lowers it. And this is one of those situations where if I was just doing pro play, Astra would be at the top of the list. But because I'm also incorporating comp in here, I just don't think she makes it up to S tier because of that. All right, let's speed through a couple more of these. I think Reyna is actually B tier. I mean, she's good, but a lot of the time you'll be like, oh, Reyna's always top fragging. That must mean she's a good agent. She's fun, and it's really easy to carry with, but if you're playing with people of your own skill level, I think you get more value out of other duelists. Speaking of more value out of other duelists, Raze is A tier, good for clearing corners, can do lots of collateral damage, post plant, deny plant, all of that stuff. Just I think the movement ability of Jett makes Jett a better pick over Raze. Breach we're going to put here with Omen. I think that he's a little lackluster right now comparing it to Skye. I'd rather have Skye flashes in every single way than Breach flashes. Breach flashes are more restrictive. They don't come back. They're more expensive. Or they're the same expense. But they don't come back. They don't give you information. And then the rest of his kit, I really like the fact that he can kill Killjoy ult is kind of big and all of that. And his ult, the buff to that was really big. But I still don't feel like that's enough to push him up to viability compared to someone like Skye. So next, let's talk about Brimstone. I don't think Brimstone's that bad of a character. I just think he's really unfun to play. So for instance, he's like the one controller I don't play. He's not bad, but I don't think he's fun. And I just feel like he's traditional. He's not as good as Viper, not as good as Astra. So I feel like B is a good place for him. Phoenix, I'm going to put down here at C. Unfortunately, I feel like he's just one of the more lackluster duelists. Outside of something like Yoru, I feel like the rest of the duelists bring something a little extra to the table. Now, on certain maps, he is better, and I will argue if this was a comp list, he'd probably be above Reyna, but I think, if this was a pro play list, he'd be above Reyna, but just all things considered, I think this is a good placement for him. Sage, I think, goes all the way up to S tier. The walls, the slows, the heals, and the res, they're all hugely impactful abilities. She can be played as that staying back sentinel or be played more duelist-y, and I think there's a lot of versatility that can be done with Sage. Sage has been a meta pick for, forever. Yoru, I think everyone knows that I added this F tier specifically for this. He is not great right now, and his reworks are still in development. Once he gets reworked, he will hopefully work his way up the list. Just, his footsteps, I don't want to say they're a useless ability, but unless you're in something like Bind, he loses a lot of value out of those. Flashes are okay. The teleport is really loud, but I do think has some value to it, and the ult's pretty good as well, but I just feel like none of it works well enough together to justify playing him over another character. But he is still very fun to play. Now, this one might be a little controversial. I'm actually going to put KO down here with Phoenix. I don't know if Suppress is that impactful of an ability. He's not picked a ton. And I think part of that is, I don't want to say he has that boring factor that Brimstone has, but he has very traditional abilities. And that's supposed to appeal to CSGO fans, and I am not one of those. And so I completely understand that, but I just feel like when I see a KO, I'm just like, I get suppressed. I'm like, okay, I guess you delayed our push 8 seconds. That's fine, and that is powerful, being able to delay a push 8 seconds, but it also doesn't guarantee do that. You can push through not having abilities. You can shoot the knife. It gives you info, but it's not as good as Sova's or Skye's. I just feel like I would rather have a Sova dart, and I don't think Suppress does enough. And so I think with us, he did get that buff, which I do think pushed him up, but I just don't think KO offers enough. And that is my opinion. I think that's the most controversial pick here. I know a lot of people would put him up towards B or A, but I think that he just isn't that interesting and isn't that powerful. I mean, the CSGO flashes, I know a lot of people end up liking him. I just feel that someone like Skye offers more than KO. And then we have Chamber. Where to place him? I believe he's a high A. Of course, he's only been out for a day now, and he was on PBE, and I've gotten to actually play a pretty big amount with him so far. So this will obviously change in the future, but in my opinion, he offers a lot. I think he offers a really nice alternative to Jett, because Jett, I don't want to say he's a needed pick, but if you're opping, Jett is the best character to do that. And now I believe that will actually be Chamber. He has a lot of different tricks you can do with him. So he can be that defensive character that's also holding the op, which I think is a new type of character or, way to play the game, which I think is really great. And I think the biggest advantage he's going to have is eco. Jett, the fact that her ult is an ability, or her ult is a gun in the form of an ability, helps so much with economy and buying ops and all of that. And he has that, but also has the Sheriff. The fact that you can be opping and have the Sheriff, I think that those two abilities are hugely insane. And also his Rendezvous, his teleport ability, is very, very good. I mean, there are lots of little things I didn't realize about it right away, and I didn't even talk about in my review. Like, you can teleport before the round starts, and there's only a 3-second cooldown on teleporting again. So what that means is you can teleport up to a high spot, pick up both of your teleports, re-put them down, and have the ability to instantly use as the round starts. So essentially, he can get up to any high place before the round starts. So there's lots of really cool stuff. His alarm bots have no range. They do slow down stuff so that people actually have to shoot at them, and they alert you. And he has 2 of them. So they're pretty crazy. I think just every part of his kit seems powerful. When you compare it to like Skye, when Skye first came out, Skye wasn't that good. And I just said, oh, she has a bunch of abilities, but other agents have better versions of those abilities. I think Chamber, no one has a better version of any of his abilities. He has a better Yoru TP. His alarm bot, I think, is better than Killjoy's. And you know, no one has, I think the op is better than Jett Knives. That's a little controversial, but I think they're just very different abilities. And then the Sheriff is, you know, there's nothing else like it. So I think that he's very unique. And because of that, it is a little hard to see what he'll do this early on. But I believe this is kind of the tier ranking. And it makes sense. At the top, you see the characters you see a lot in game. Either way, I want to know what you guys think. If you want to send me your top characters or anything like that in the comments down below, I'd be really interested to see those. I feel pretty confident about this list. I'd like to see some buffs for those characters in D and F and maybe even C. And maybe, I don't know if any of them need nerfs. I don't think anyone feels oppressive right now. But we'll have to wait and see as the meta forms. Let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. Again, like and subscribe. This is a new channel. I'm trying out some things, see what people like, what people don't. I will see you in the next one. Bye.